This is Ayani.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're joined by Andrew Cooper to talk about the Korean drama Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, which you can find on Netflix.
We get into the quote-unquote manic pixie dream guy, the allures of small-town neighborhood stories, and ask ourselves, how much rom-com is too much rom-com?
If you'd like to join the conversation and get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at SexLoveLit.
And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Sex, Love, Literature. We're very excited to have you as always. Wow, this is actually a Sex, Love, Literature, like full deep dive episode. This is not a La Petite that we're doing. We've had kind of a run of, I want to say 3 or 4 La Petite episodes back to back. But I am very excited to say that. Oh, go ahead.
Well, to be fair, the La Petites were not always very petite.
No, that's fair, but they had like the La Petite picture on them, so technically they were classified that way. I made it so like I want to show off the fact that it exists and it's a thing that's there. But this is going to be a deep dive episode on a relatively new, I think actually we could call it brand new K-drama that came out this year called Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha that we are very excited to talk with you all about today. One of the things that makes this episode a little extra special is that we have a special guest that is going to be on the show with us that is perhaps a little extra special to me. But before we jump into that, we have a little bit of news to start off our podcast. I'm going to throw the Oh my God, I am doing so okay, real quick. There was this TikTok about the people that overemphasize when they're going to pass the conversation on to somebody else in Zoom. And I was like, oh, that's me. I feel that.
Yeah, you do that.
And I was literally about to do it right there. So I'm calling myself out for doing it. But I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to pass the mic over to Corinne really quickly because she has some fun upcoming news about podcasting related activities that she's doing.
Yeah, so I had the chance to record with the wonderful hosts of Afternoona Delight, which is a K-drama podcast hosted by 3 romance authors who look at K-dramas through a writer's lens. And they very graciously invited me to be on their podcast for an episode about K-drama kisses. So that was super fun. I had a lot of fun recording with them. They are lovely. And that episode will drop in mid-November, so you should definitely check it out. We'll be sharing it on our social media as well. And you can find us, by the way, on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SexLoveLit, all one word. So we'll share that episode once it drops.
All right. Sounds good. So without further ado, why don't we introduce our special guest? Listeners, I would like to welcome Andrew Cooper, my spouse, to Sex, Love, Literature. Yay!
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. So I don't know, he makes me goofy, but for those of you who
I make you goofy.
Yeah, she's never goofy at any other time ever.
Never.
Cool. Good to know.
No,
Good to know.
No way ever. Never. But for those of you who maybe this is your first episode or you haven't listened to some of our back catalog, I feel like we've talked about Andrew quite a few times on the podcast, how we like to tease him when he's playing video games.
It's not just when I'm playing video game, just to be clear, but I'm sorry.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. But also, I guess, we talk with Andrew a lot about media as we're watching it. Andrew has recently started watching K-dramas as a way to keep connected with Corinne now that we're living in Texas, which has been a change and a shift. So for a little bit about Andrew, because I know he'll just be like, I'm just a dude. That's just who I am. For a little bit about Andrew, for a very long period of time, I want to say maybe about 7 or 8 years, he was a script doctor in indie circuits. He would do editing on different kinds of screenplays and film scripts, as well as, what's the term? It's not copy. What is it when you do a write-up about it, a summary for it?
Coverage.
Yeah. So he would
Script
do coverage
coverage.
for scripts and things like that. So he's a constant student of the craft, which is one of the reasons that he and I get along so well, because we're always talking about media from a variety of different angles.
I love how professional you made me sound.
Oh yeah, I can't be out here like, oh no, he's a bum. Like, I'm not gonna do that.
No?
But yeah, do you want to say something to our listeners? Tell them about who you are. What do you do? Why
I
are
mean,
you here?
nepotism. That's why I'm here. That's
Oh,
why I'm
okay.
here.
All right.
I mean, to be
Nepotism.
fair, this is also a consolation prize because we have not yet recorded on the film Your Name, which he was supposed to come on the podcast to talk about.
I mean, I wasn't gonna say it, but yes, originally we had talked about me coming on the podcast to do an episode on Your Name, which is one of my favorite movies. Period. But that has been shelved in lieu of hometown cha cha cha, which is fine. Fine, it's okay.
No bitter
Is
feelings
it?
there at all.
No bitter feelings. But yeah, I'm just happy to finally be on the show and not just kind of be listening in the background, trying not to make noises and typically failing at that.
Yeah, there is one episode. I forgot which one it was, but you can distinctly hear Andrew whistling as he's walking around in the background. So, this is your second time on the podcast, I guess we can say. So, today we are, as Andrew has said, and as I said earlier, we're going to be talking about the Netflix K-drama Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, which just recently ended. I think it ended last week, right?
Yep.
A week ago today for when we're recording, so I guess on October 17th?
17th? Yeah, on October 17th. So this is a really, really recent story that Corinne kind of got into first and brought us onto the Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha train.
That's not true.
Whoa. See,
Oh.
you're out here, you're singing my praises in the first half. And then in the second half, you're just totally underselling my accomplishments here. I was the one that found Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha and recommended it to Corinne.
Well, okay. Why don't you tell the people about that then, since I'm so very wrong?
I'm just saying. No, sure. I'm just correcting factual errors. That's all.
So one thing I forgot to mention about Andrew that I wrote on our document is that he's annoying and he's a pain in my butt. I kid. So as we said, we're going to be talking about Home Cha today, which I know we are all very excited to kind of hash out and go through our thoughts on. But before we dive in, why don't we do a round of What's Sparking Joy? So for those of you that don't know, What's Sparking Joy is a quick moment where we talk about the different kinds of media that are bringing us joy in our lives as we're going through our day-to-day. We're not necessarily going to do a deep dive about them. We're not going to spend a lot of time about them, but I think it's a good way to kind of broaden the conversation about media and also think about, the context in which we're talking about different things that we're talking about.
Also, it's just fun.
And it's fun. So Corinne, what's sparking joy for you?
Yeah, so the first thing that is sparking joy is, surprise, surprise, a K-drama. This one is called The King's Affection. It is on Netflix. I am making Andrew watch it with me, but the setup is that there is a pair of twins born into the royal family for reasons that are stupid, but whatever. The king doesn't like that they are twins. They're fraternal twins, one boy and one girl, and he orders that the girl be killed because he doesn't want the prince to have shared a womb with a girl for, I don't know. It's very silly, but whatever. But then for reasons, when they're 11 or so, the young crown prince is killed, and the princess, who has been smuggled off and been living as an orphan through complicated plot machinations, ends up having to pretend to be the prince and take his place. So there's a lot of cross-dressing, there's a lot of gender stuff going on, there's a lot of drama, but the thing that I really like about it is that I thought based on that setup that this was just going to be a kind of goofy comedic drama. It is not. The stakes are very high. Many people die very quickly and in every episode, and it's really interesting to see this sort of cross-dressing trope and gender disguise, woman who has to disguise herself as a man, taken so very seriously. For me, at least, as a viewer, I really, really feel the precarity of her situation. every minute of every day she could be discovered. And if she is, it's not just going to be like, oh, that's so goofy. Why'd you do that? It's going to be like, no, you're going to be beheaded promptly.
Yeah, the show's just really intense. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
starts off. I remember Corinne and I, when we were having a conversation about the show before we started watching it, we weren't sure kind of what the tone was going to be because we hadn't seen much in the way of trailers. And I
Well,
think
and the
within like,
trailers that we'd seen are super goofy. They're just like
yeah,
her tutor, like being like, "Huh, I don't know. This seems a little sus." Like,
yeah, isn't that strange? And then like within the first 5 minutes, the body count is literally in the double digits, and
yeah,
that's not an exaggeration. And
Jesus. Okay.
it's not like it's visceral,
yeah.
so it's very intense.
But anyway, The King's Affection, sparking joy. Highly recommend, especially if historical cross dressing is at all your jam. Ayani, what is sparking joy for you?
So I also have a K-drama on my list because Corinne has influenced us all with her ways.
I have
But
no
joking
regrets.
aside, I've been catching up on Yumi Cells, which I really enjoy. I know I've talked about Yumi Cells previously. I had taken a pause on it to actually finish Home Cha, but I'm back to watching Yumi Cells again. And one of the things that I really like about it is this was a webtoon that I had read a few years back and really enjoyed. So I'm having fun watching the adaptation choices where they lean into kind of more animated things rather than live action things has been a lot of fun for me. And the cast is just delightful. Everyone is really great and fun to watch, and the use of color is delightful. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of fun. It's just a really great show. So Yumi Cells has been sparking a lot of joy for me. I can't wait to finish this season. I'm really glad it's going to have 3 seasons because I hope that means they're going to go through the entirety of the story, which I cannot tell people about because I don't want to be a spoiling monster. But yeah, so Yumi Cells is what's sparking joy for me. And also, I know we talked about this, like, I think it was in our catching up episode, but I finally got my Elixni hatchling, and that's making me very excited. So that sparks much joy.
For listeners, she has her Elixni Hashling stuffed animal and is like stroking it on
I'm not
camera.
stroking it on camera. Whoa.
Okay,
That
okay. Not
that
only
became
is she
extra.
not only is she stroking it on camera, when
I
it
am not
arrived,
stroking
she
it.
literally called me and was like, "Hey Andrew, our baby is here." That's that's is
I'm
that
not
not true? Did that
stroking.
not
Okay,
happen?
that second part is true. I wasn't stroking
Okay.
it. I was fixing its wraps. It has little wraps,
Okay.
like a bundle. Just saying. But yes, I did call Andrew and say the baby is here, and I sent a picture to the fam chat, and I was like, it has arrived. So I'm very excited about my hatchling.
Are you
Okay,
going to
It
tell
well,
them
sparks
that you
joy.
named it? You named it?
I wasn't gonna tell him that. No, Andrew. God damn, I should not have brought you on this podcast. Just blowing up
Got to
my
keep
spot.
you honest.
Yes, okay. So the baby has a strong Elixni name, but we'll leave it there because this is not a podcast about Destiny. Okay.
all right.
Andrew, what's sparking joy for
Yeah.
you? You annoying man creature.
So two things are sparking joy for me, and they're actually kind of interrelated. One is the show Ted Lasso, which I have been watching the first 2 seasons of over the course of like the last few months, and have just adore. It is a show like it was based on an ESPN gag where Jason Sudeikis, I'm probably butchering his last name, but
Sudeikis?
Sudeikis. Ooh, I
Wow.
butchered his last
So
name.
you're just as bad as me.
I am. This is why we work.
All right.
We
Cheers
just
to
butcher
that.
names
Put
together.
your names together.
But it was a gag where he was a American football coach that ended up coaching a Premier League team. It was literally just to like promote ESPN's coverage of the Premier League, and then they went and they turned it into a show that is somehow has emotionally complex and honest characters, subverts expectations left and right, and just it never goes kind of for the low hanging fruit in terms of expectations for like how characters will behave, and it's very much so interested in nuance human psychology and behavior. So yeah, I've just been loving that show. And also, slightly related is fantasy soccer. I know next to nothing about soccer. Most of what I know about soccer comes from Ted Lasso. One of my best friends is like, he's obsessed with soccer. And he made me sign up to join his fantasy league. And they had a whole draft. I didn't even really participate. It like the random number generated, selected my team. Everybody else in the league is super into soccer. After week one, I'm in first place, and they are all big mad. We'll see how
Well,
that goes.
congratulations on pissing off a whole nother group of people, Andrew.
I know it's not just you guys. I gotta spread it around.
Uh, so joy has been sparked.
So before we jump into our hometown cha-cha-cha discussion proper, we do want to note that there has been some scandal around the troubling behavior of Kim Sono, who plays the male lead in the show, towards an ex-girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to get into the details here, but we did want to note that we're aware of it, and that does sort of inform, I think, the way that we approach the show now. But
Yeah.
after some discussion, because we did think about whether we still wanted to do a show on to do an episode on this show at all, we decided that we wanted to go ahead with our deep dive because we didn't want the bad behavior of one person to erase the good work done by the rest of the cast and crew.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially since, I don't know, it feels like for a lot of these cast members, this is kind of breakout roles for some of them, or kind of important roles in their videography.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the way you put it, of kind of like not erasing the good work of a whole bunch of other people, is a good way to kind of think about it. So a lot of what we're getting about the scandal is translated articles and things like that. So we're not going to spend too much time dwelling on it. And we are going to be thinking critically about the show in and of itself, but we wanted to kind of, provide that context, provide that awareness. I mean, this is something that we do in classrooms too, when we talk about texts whose authors are perhaps problematic, to use an overused word, but like when we teach Lewis Carroll, for instance, in Alice in Wonderland, there are some conversations that have to be had about Lewis Carroll before you can go ahead and teach that text. So bringing a little bit of that praxis to our podcast. To start our conversation, here's the show description from Netflix. A big city dentist opens up a practice in a close-knit seaside village, home to a charming jack of all trades who is her polar opposite in every way. So, Andrew, what was it that made you decide to watch Home Cha?
Probably the fact that it really reminded me of a lot of like early 2000s rom-com. And I figured that that would be something that both Corinne and I could enjoy. So yeah, that was mainly what it was.
Yeah, and I think Netflix does a really good job with their trailers sometimes, even though apparently it seems like The King's Affection was a little bit misleading. I feel like the trailers for Home Cha did a good job of setting up the kind of show that you were getting into, in my opinion. And what's interesting is apparently, thanks to Asian Wiki, we know this, but it's a remake of a 2004 South Korean movie called Mr. Hong, which now I understand why our main character, our male lead's last name is Hong. There's that connection there. So,
well, and that does also make sense with that sort of like early 2000s vibe that you were picking up, Andrew. Because I think, I do think, in my experience of watching K-dramas, they have a better handle on the rom-com at this particular moment in time than American television does, but it does have that same sort of charming, opposites attract kind of goofy setup going on.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw, because I was just doing some quick Googling on the show before, earlier this morning, and when I saw the Mr. Hong 2004 remake, it made so much about the show make sense in terms of some of its character decisions, in terms of kind of why it was married to the type of tone that it was, and also kind of some of the comparing and contrasting I saw between some differences between the modern version and the 2004 version.
Look at you doing research.
Yeah, I was doing just a smidgen of research. It was more. it was more so that I was interested in kind of understanding some of the tropes based on conversations that Corinne and I had about K-drama
Mm.
tropes, and it came up. And there you go.
So to introduce some of the main characters, so to be clear, this has a huge ensemble cast that we really, really enjoy, but we're probably
Yes.
just going to focus on the main ones for a lot of our discussion. And as we come up against anyone else we want to mention, we will tell you who they are. But for those of you who have not seen Hometown Cha 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 or who may need a reminder, our main players are Yoon Hye-jin, who is played by Shin Min-na, who is the dentist in question. She leaves her practice the practice she works at in Seoul and decides to start a practice in Gongjin, which is a small seaside town. Next, we have Hong Du-shik, also known as Chief Hong, who is played by Kim Son-ho, and he is a jack of all trades who's incredibly charming and has a secret dark past.
Bum, bum, bum.
Next, we have our delightful second male lead, Ji Sung-hyun, played by Lee Sung-yi, who is a director of a variety show that he decides to set in Gongjin. Variety shows are really, really big in South Korean pop culture. And he also knows Hye-jin because he was her college senior. So hence we have our second male lead set up. And then we also have Pyo Mi-son, who played by Gong Min-jung, who is Hye-jin's hygienist and bestie, who comes
I
with
love
her
her.
to Gongjin from Seoul.
After a nasty breakup too. So like, yeah, she also needed to come to Gongjin, as it were. And then yeah, as Corinne said, we'll get into other cast members as they come up in conversation because there are a lot of really, really good ones. It's kind of like when we were talking about Crash Landing on You. There's so many different characters that we fell in love with, but we don't want to overload you all at the beginning with everyone's names. So, to kind of start our conversation, since it seems like we were all interested in this story because it was a romance, because it kind of picked up on some of those early 2000s vibes without some of the troubling aspects of early 2000s rom-coms that we perhaps would rather forget exist and just leave in the past. We thought it might be interesting to think a bit about Hye-jin as a romantic lead, and some other kind of romance tropes that really drew us to this story. So I'm going to kind of not defer, but like throw the ball to you guys a lot because this was a show that you picked up on early and then I kind of was playing catch up afterwards. But like, what do you all think about our dentist as a romantic lead? Did you enjoy the way that like romance tropes were being used?
Okay.
They're shrugging at each other.
Yeah, I know. We're trying to see who's going to go first. I enjoy Hye-jin as a romantic lead, particularly the early episodes where I think the most important thing about any lead is just your ability to be able to identify with them and empathize with them, and the amount of just sheer embarrassment that she had to go through in those first kind of two episodes was more than enough to get me in her corner. Like, what's the term for cringe humor? Social horror stories.
I hate that. I hate that so much.
But that's essentially
yeah.
kind of like what those first two episodes felt like for her, particularly the second one. So I feel like that was very effective in getting me to root for her, watching her kind of suffer through that and then have to overcome it.
I mean, so something that I really liked about, or that I really like about Hye-jin is that she's very decisive. And like when she makes a decision, she tends to make it very quickly. And I mean, there you can see a little bit of like the strings being pulled at the beginning that like the reason she has to leave her practice in Seoul is that she thinks that her boss is making unethical decisions about like what I don't know, what dental work people need. Yeah. To like charge them the most money, and she doesn't want to be a part of that, but then she ends up being blacklisted because of that, and she also like gets drunk and posts about it on the internet. But
yeah, I was gonna say that's what got her more blacklisted.
But when she decides to go to Gongjin, I don't know, and maybe I don't know, maybe I'm telling on myself a little bit, but her very sort of prickliness and like wanting things to be done a certain way, and that's her way, and like wanting people to not cross the line, and her just sort of approach to like people felt very
Mm.
familiar to me because that's how I approach people. Um, but another thing that, oh, Andrew, you look like you have a thought.
No, I did, but I can hold it.
But the other thing that I thought was very interesting, so I was talking about Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha with Minji, who was a friend of the show and was on our episode on Crash Landing on You, and she
Hi,
was
Minji,
saying
hi.
she was saying that Heijin uses the most aegyo on a regular basis that she's ever seen a character use. And for those of you not familiar, aegyo is a particular kind of acting cute that is common in Korean culture, and particularly like K-pop stars use it, but also like women use it to flirt. And something that Minji suggested was that like partially because Hyejin is so sharp and has so many sharp edges that she was probably using so much aegyo to make her more palatable to a male audience.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, and it was particularly interesting to me, like, as part of an American audience, like, I don't speak Korean. Like,
Mhm.
even if I recognize some words now, like, I don't speak Korean. So, like, particularly the things that Minji was picking up on were, like, Hyejin's pronunciation of words. So, like, while I
Mm.
can pick up on Igyo when it's, like, dialed up to 11, like in Be Melodramatic, and, like, in another drama, Fight for My Way, where they sort of, like, make fun of Aegyo a little bit. Like, this was not like, oh, what's the word? Like, they were not parodying Aegyo here. Heijin was like legitimately using it, and like that actress, Minji said that that actress was very, very good at it.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Once she pointed it out, I could see it, like looking back, but like I did not pick up on that watching it myself the first time.
Yeah. And I mean, this might be a good place just to mention, of course, we're going to be talking about Home Cha from our perspective as like Americans, right? We're not going to assume that we have a full understanding of Korea or Korean culture in talking about this. But I think this is a great insight from Minji. Like, I'm really glad that you guys had this conversation and that she allowed us to bring her knowledge onto our pod in this way.
And that makes a lot of sense when you think about the character. Because, like you said, it's not even just that she's prickly. She's one of the things that really kind of impressed me just about the character in general is that she has just like the utmost confidence in her rightness in almost like any
Mm-hmm.
given situation, for better and for worse. It's one of those double-edged sword traits. And what I like about it is that we get to see when it pays off for her.
Mm-hmm.
We get to see when it causes her to fall flat on her face.
Mhm. Mhm.
But having kind of, how do you pronounce it? Because I feel like I'm gonna say the other word that Ayani thought it was.
So, for context behind the scenes, I texted Ayani and Andrew last night to ask them if they knew what Aegyo was, and Ayani thought it was something else. Ayani, would you like to tell us what you thought that it
Nope,
was?
y'all can handle this.
Okay, so Ayani thought it was ahegao, which is entirely different. It is a term from Japanese hentai, which is pornography, and it's basically the O face that the overly expressive O face that the ladies make in the manga, which
Also,
is
like, Ayani texted me back immediately. Like, I texted her, and like within 30 seconds, she was like, "Oh, you mean that?" It's like, why would I mean that, Ayani? Why would I mean that? Why would I know that even?
because Koreans out here reads a lot of hentai, apparently. A lot of hentai.
Oh no.
So yes, I feel like I'm gonna say that. What is it?
Aegyo.
Agyo?
Aegyo.
Egyo. So yeah, I can see how those traits would kind of balance that out, particularly because like somebody like Hyejin probably would be intimidating for, well, not all members of the male audience clearly, but for some folks. So yeah, that is an interesting observation.
Anything else about the whole romantic comedy setup that like was particularly appealing to you or off-putting even? Like with like Hyejin's sudden move to the countryside?
Not so much. I kind of feel like, again, they did a very good job of kind of establishing what the tone of the series was.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me was part of the buy-in. If you had issues with that, the rest of the series probably wasn't going to work for you,
Mm.
So no, I didn't really have any particular issues with the setup. I'll elaborate later, but I feel like there are kind of some issues with the length of it. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, I feel like one of the things or one of the shortcomings that I kind of noticed with this show was that a lot of these romantic comedy tropes, the very things that kind of attracted us to it, when you kind of put them in this 16 episode setup, at least kind of the way that this show did, they don't necessarily have the legs to go that far and for that long. And I feel like there are some elements of it, like Dusic's backstory and things of that nature, that kind of start to unravel the longer you stay with them. But that's, again, part of a different conversation.
But I guess maybe kind of building on that, Dushik's whole characterization and his
Yeah.
whole deal, I think we should maybe think a little bit about him as a stereotypical or non-stereotypical, depending on what our take is, romantic comedy lead, and what is being set up here as like a romantic ideal through his
Yeah.
character and his relationship with Hyejin.
No, absolutely. So I think I was being a little controversial when I texted the group chat and said this, but Dushik really, in a lot of ways, kind of feels like a manic pixie dream man to me in some of his setup, in that he's not only did he go to Seoul University, which he doesn't bring up, but Heijin brings up constantly, but he went to like the top school. He's good with money. He's, very, very intelligent, but then also has a million different qualifications for, like, he does woodworking, he can build things, he can repair electronics, he's also a child psychologist, like he has child therapy licenses. So like this man can do any and everything. One of the visual gags of the show that I actually enjoy is when he pulls out his wallet with all of his licenses and it's just this humongous billfold filled with all of these different things that he has. But I know one thing that I'm sensitive to in media, and this might just be an Ayani thing, so I'm happy for the pushback, but like I'm always very wary of perfect characters and characters who can do anything and be anything and are just like at the top of their game all the time. So one of the things with Chief Hong is that I'm like, okay, he's perfect, but super perfect. And it feels like even though he is a well-rounded character, so I know I'm using this definitely more tongue in cheek, and we should give the definition of manic pixie dream girl too, which is what I'm playing off of. But like in a lot of ways, his purpose is to make Hyejin less of a prickly pear, less of the hedgehog, which is also another visual motif that the show uses. Like, so that's kind of what it felt like to me in some ways.
So I guess to give you some context, in case you're not familiar with the term manic pixie dream girl, it was coined in 2007 by film critic Nathan Rabin. Anyway, he coined it to talk about a particular female character who, quote, exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures. And his critique of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is that she stays static and doesn't change and only exists for the male character. I do think it's also important to note that he has since distanced himself from the term because it has, I think, been used pretty broadly to condemn all quirky female characters. So it's one of those things where like it's started being used so broadly that it sort of ceases to have the same meaning.
Right.
But something that I think is interesting to think about in this sort of context is like, what would the opposite of the manic pixie dream girl be, and would he be like Chief Hong?
Right.
So I think that the key factor when you're trying to determine manic pixie dream girl or manic pixie, dream guy, whichever, is that basically their existence is all about the development and self-actualization of the lead character. It's not, they don't necessarily have a rich kind of internal life or goals of their own. It's all about really kind of uplifting that person. And I feel like Chief Hung kind of sits, he's very much so on that line. And I feel like that's something that is very intentional because it's funny. I think Ayani and I had two very different reactions to him being good at everything,
Mm.
because from my standpoint, it felt like it was a joke that the show was very much so in on. It wasn't so much just treated as like, oh, he's good at everything and this makes him, you know, a desirable partner. It was
Ah,
like he's good at everything, but it got to a point where it was clear that they were, at least for me, it felt clear that they were, kind of winking at us.
I mean, yes and no. I agree that it's part of the joke that the show is making, but when so many of those skills become kind of the backbone of the community that he's in, they're playing it straight. They're having their cake and eating it too, right? So the fact
Hmm.
that he has a certification in child therapy is, of course, supposed to be a joke, but he also works for everyone in the town. Like, he fixes things, he's lifting things, he's being a waiter. And one of the key moments in his relationship with Hyejin is when he makes her a jewelry box. So kind of elevating these skills that he has with his hands, even though he's not working with money or working with his engineering degree anymore. So on one hand, it is a joke, but on the other hand, I think there is kind of this leaning into this, I don't want to say woodsy because he's in the seaside kind of, but a kind of like quote unquote a desirable blue collar man. And I'm putting huge quotes around that. But I think that's also playing on the fact that he wasn't that and now he is that. So it's like you can have your man that can do this and that kind of a thing. So I don't know. I feel like some of it is a joke, but some of it is played very, very straight.
I do think it's interesting to note, perhaps just for context, if nothing else, that he charges minimum wage for his services no matter what he's doing, whether
Hmm.
he's delivering food or redecorating or oh, I can't think of the right word, but like he sets up Hyejin's dental office. So he does have a lot
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
like technicals. Like he doesn't just do woodworking. He also, can
Right.
do like electrical wiring, and like he
Hmm.
makes soap for the
Painting.
old
Yeah.
women that like handle the squid that like come in every day. And he's such a jack of all trades. And I think something that is maybe also ties into Andrew's complaint about the pacing here is that he does end up having like a backstory of some
Hmm.
significance, but I think maybe part of why it's sitting uncomfortably with Ayani is it takes so long to learn
Yeah.
it that he
Hmm.
stays to quote unquote perfect for too long.
That's kind of why I say I feel like he's kind of just on that line because there is depth to him. He does have, internal struggles that we do get a window into. But like you said, it takes such a long time for us to do that and us to like, I think it's literally like one episode where it's just like trauma conga line of sorts where like everything comes out at the same time. And it's like we have to kind of unpack all of it within the span
I
of
think
this
it's
one
episode
episode.
15 too. So like it's a
Yeah,
Yeah.
16
it's
episode
right at the
series.
end.
Yeah.
And this was something that like I had talked about with Corinne some, the idea of the mystery box that's used a lot with Dusik
I'm sorry.
and how it doesn't pay off. What's so funny?
I don't know. We've already clarified that my head just goes to bad places sometimes.
Oh my
I blame the
god.
I blame the fact that I study erotic fiction on the regular, and that's the dissertation chapter that I'm working on. But Mystery Box just makes me giggle. Anyway, continue
Of
about
course it does.
Chief
The
Hong's
mystery
Mystery Box.
box that nothing explicit is into. You're a trip, Addy. So
You
yes,
love
mystery
me.
box. I do. So mystery box was a
Okay, get
phrase
that off the
actually.
podcast. Get that cuteness out of here.
Oh, I meant it for both of you. You love me too, Corinne.
That's
Okay.
not true. You were talking to me. I need all the affection over here.
Okay. All right. Fine. Anyhow, mystery box.
Mystery box, yeah. So the mystery box was a term coined by J.J. Abrams during a TED talk, where he was talking about the way that stories can kind of employ overarching mysteries to create tension, but also to generate audience curiosity. But kind of the double edged sword of the mystery box is that you eventually have to answer the question and you have to figure out when is the right time to answer the question.
The question of what's in the box.
Yeah. So
Okay.
in this case with Dusek, the question is kind of like what happened to him in Soul? Like we know what happened with his grandparents and what happened or with his grandfather and with his parents, but
For
kind of the
context,
big
Dushik is an orphan, and his grandfather died when he was a child, so he was raised by like the townspeople of Gongjin.
Yeah.
yes. And so we kind of know that, but we also know that he went to Seoul and something really bad happened there, but we don't quite know what. And we get these glimpses and this mystery. I feel like it's teased out literally over like 9, 10 episodes.
Mm.
And by the time we get the answer, the series is over.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like because they teased it out so long, there's this and I feel like the story does humanize him a great deal and it makes him seem like, oh, well, this is a fully fleshed out person with his own, with his own trauma and that is working through stuff. Like we get that in the 11th hour. So we spend the entire series with Perfect Dusik that kind of has these weird flashbacks, and it never really fleshes out. We don't really get the catharsis of seeing him kind of overcome his trauma because his trauma is kind of just this thing that flares up every once in a while and never really seems like a true impediment to how he lives his life.
So let's rewind a little bit because I think these are all really great points, but I wonder how they feed back into the question of what do we think of Dushik as a romantic ideal, as being set up as the desirable man in this context. Because I think that's an interesting question to ask in tandem with the question of the mystery box, so to speak, in that does the romantic ideal need the right amount of sad backstory in order to be, you know, in order to balance out the fact that he can also repaint your house and do your wiring and fight the man that wants to steal your underwear? Because there was that whole storyline also about the creeper in the town. So, I mean, do all of these things, how do we read him then as the romantic ideal in this show? I think it's a complicated question, especially when we consider him against the second male lead of director G. What do y'all think? Because I don't know if I have an answer for it.
So it's not so much about, it's not just his traumatic backstory that kind of humanizes him. And it's not that like the traumatic backstory is necessary. I think it's just it gives us another context to view the character through, other than kind of just how.
So he worked for me as a character, and partially that was because I really enjoyed Kim Sono's performance. But I think the reason the pieces all sort of fit together for me, even before we knew exactly what the details of his trauma were, are that part of the reason that he is the way he is and that he's so helpful is that he kind of needs to be needed. And he needed, and that was apparent from pretty early on, from way before we knew that everything was very sad for him and whatever. But like when different people, so like when, for example, the second male lead started like doing some of the things that Chief Hong was used to doing, or like when they started paying a little bit more attention to like Hye Jin after the man breaks into her house, and he had like, he didn't necessarily react. Well, he did sometimes react very jealously, but
Yes, he did.
he wasn't just sort of like a perfect, calm surface. You could, at least to me, there was enough going on with like explaining why he was the way he was and so helpful was because he became that way in order to make himself indispensable to the town. So whenever something threatened that indispensability, you can sort of see that working under the surface for like how he responded to things, which to me worked to counteract this manic pixie dream guy possible problem.
So, not to jump away from Chief Hong too quickly, but a lot of the conversation has been bringing up like the other folks in Gongjin, and I think it would be important to kind of sit with the town for a second and the townspeople because they do kind of create such a rich tapestry that the love story is unfolding in front of. And I know for me, what kind of started really to pull me into the show was when I became attached to all of the different colorful characters that were running around in the background in this seaside town. So, Corinne, you watch a lot of K dramas. I mean, are a lot of the ones that you've seen, speaking from your experience, are they set in like seaside towns? Like, I know I just finished watching Homestruck, not Homestruck in the City. Wow,
Love Struck in
Lovestruck
the
in the
City.
City. I just finished watching Love Struck in the City before starting Home Trot, and that also had like a seaside town vibe juxtaposed against the city as well. But I don't think they were like sitting with it in the same way
So
because, yeah.
so I will say that very few dramas are set majority in small towns, at least that I've seen, and Minji agreed with this. So like even with like Love Struck in the City, they do have like the beach town vibe, but it's only for a few episodes and then it's largely set in Seoul. So there's
Right.
like the sense in most dramas that everything goes back to Seoul. So like the only other dramas really that I can think of that have like that are in and about small towns are When the Camellia Blooms and I'll Go to You When the Weather is Fine.
Oh,
And
it's okay. Not be okay.
and it's okay to not be okay. But for those dramas, there's this sort of sense of the small town is like an escape from Seoul and is kind of an opposite from Seoul. I think there's an interesting layer here in that it is particularly a seaside beach kind of town, and that there is the trope in a lot of dramas of the romantic beach date, which I think is maybe more what Love Struck in the City was playing with the like extended romantic beach date. Slash secret marriage.
I had so many feelings about that, but all right.
But like it's the seaside and the beach has like a sort of, I think, particularly romantic overtone to it that this drama was both playing with and perhaps utilizing.
Did you like the seaside town, y'all?
Yeah. So one of my favorite K dramas, and also kind of like I think it was the second one that I watched was Reply 1988, and that was in Northern Seoul technically, but it really kind of just focused on this block. So it had this very communal feel where you kind of knew everybody who lived on that block. You knew the teachers, you knew all the characters
And the
because
characters all knew each other.
Exactly. And so I don't know, there's just something very, for me personally, very attractive about that because the best shows, it kind of feels like you are hanging out with this group of characters, right? And you are watching them as they are living their lives. And when you have these shows that are set in this community, it almost heightens that because not only are you watching the main characters kind of live their lives, you're seeing how they interact with all these different side characters and how each of them kind of relates to them in a different way and what their place in the community is. And so something about that is always just very, very rewarding. And this show definitely had that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really came to appreciate the relationships between the side characters and the fact that Gongjin really felt like a lived in place, which sounds like a silly thing to say, but I think there's something to be said for when you're like introduced to a location and it doesn't feel like a set, when it really feels like, yeah, there's history to this place that we're not going to see and that the people in this place are going to continue living long after we move away from the show. So that was something that I really, really liked about it. I know some of the things that actually got to my heart is when one of the characters who she's kind of played as like this annoying talkative lady who likes to hit people when she's talking to them. Her name is Jo Nam Suk, and she's played by Cha Chung Hwa, who is one of our favorite North Korean ladies from Crash Landing on You, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly, right?
Yeah, she's in Crash Landing on You, and she also plays a hilarious court lady in Mr. Queen.
Yes, mama. Yeah, that was really good. So we like her. We are almost guaranteed to check something out if she's in it.
Mhm.
But one of the things that you learn about Namsuk is that she had a daughter who had cancer, I believe,
Mhm.
um, and who died pretty young. So for me, even though it was like a really short blip of an episode, it really added context to her and how she behaves. And I kind of started watching how she interacts with the other characters all the more closely because of this little bit of her life that I've learned. So I really did enjoy learning about the other characters. It wasn't like I was in a rush to get away from them to get back to the main romance, which sometimes happens in shows like this where I'm like, oh, there's one couple I care about. That's who I want to pay attention to. Like, I was really interested in the full swath of characters that were coming across the screen.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, they took characters that could have easily been just, archetypes, neighborhood
Hmm, hmm.
archetypes, and they fleshed them out. So Namsuk is definitely one example. Another one is what's his name? O Chunjae, the coffee shop, the cafe owner,
Oh, Oh
who
Mhm.
Yoon. That's his Oh
yeah.
Yoon is what he wants to be called. Thank you very much. But yes.
But like his whole deal as like, having been basically a one-hit wonder and then
He
kind of
had a song
returning,
that became number 2 in, like, 1988 or something.
lest we forget. And I love the fact that like, he never lets anybody forget it. And he
Mhm.
can be, he can be very deliberately like, annoying about it. But also, he's this kind guy that loves his daughter a
Mm.
great deal.
Whew.
The material with him and his wife and his departed wife
Ooh,
just
I
breaks
was
my
a
heart.
mess. I was a mess. There was a part where he was like, "I still love her, and I love her till this day." And I remember what it was like walking down the aisle, and I was just like weeping. I was like, "Oh." And then his daughter Judy too, she talks about the fact that she didn't get a chance to meet her mother because her mother
Hmm.
died shortly after she was born. And I was like, well, now I'm crying. Thanks, Judy. Thanks.
Well, something that I think the show did a very good job of is, like, when we meet them through Hyejin and through her perspective of being new to
Hmm.
this town, we mostly see the ways that they are, like, extremely obnoxious.
Mm,
Like,
mhm,
this
mhm.
coffee shop owner, like, he makes terrible coffee. Like, the
Terrible.
coffee is not good, and as a fellow coffee snob, I also would have trouble drinking this coffee if all I wanted to do was use the damn restroom. But, like,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
then they'd fill it in gradually in a way that, to me, for the most part, I think some characters' backstories were more compelling than others, but
I
they'd
agree,
fill it in a
yes.
way that never felt like info dumping and instead felt like
Yes.
we were
Mhm.
getting to know this town and this community at the same time that Hyejin was.
Yes. Mhm.
Hmm.
I agree. I think that was one of the many one of the strengths of this show was how we were introduced to the diverse cast of characters and how we came to learn about them. Like another one
Mhm.
that really stood out to me was Kim Gamri, who was kind of like Chief Hong's surrogate grandmother who looked out for him when he was small. And a lot of her story revolves around cooking for people and preparing food for people. She's like the food grandma who comes over, and if you're like, "Oh, I already ate," she's like, "Well, I got dessert ready for you. It's fine." And one of her first interactions with Hyejin is trying to feed her something with her hands, and Hyejin is like, "Oh no, I'm not going to." She like makes Gamri put it in a spoon and then puts it down. So she rejects food from the food grandmother. So I think that's pointing to kind of one of the things that you're talking about, Corinne, that when we meet these characters through Hyejin's eyes, they're annoying and weird and want to use their quote unquote dirty hands to put food in her mouth, you know?
Which,
And
like, to be fair, it's a pandemic. I don't want food someone else has been touching in my mouth.
There was no pandemic in Gongjin, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Okay.
I don't think that they had
It
a
would be a
pandemic in this
completely different
reality.
show. Oh my gosh, because she's a dentist? She's up in people's mouths?
Oh, yeah.
Ah! But anyhow, but we learn a lot about Gamri through food and her feeding people and Hejin eating her food and like coming to love her cooking and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's an excellent, excellent point. Like one of their bonding points is when Hyejin fixes her teeth so that she can eat squid again. So yeah. Did we want to talk a little bit about the other love triangle before we move on to something else since we're talking about townspeople? I know Andrew has very strong feelings about this triangle, and I think Corinne might as well. But
Are we talking about the triangle where Corinne led me astray and got my hopes
I
up?
was perfectly happy with that's not entirely true. But anyway, there is a real honest to God lesbian in this show who is like officially a lesbian, and I am happy with that as an outcome. But Andrew, would you like to give the context of what happened with her?
So one of the mysteries of this show revolved around this love triangle between Hua Jiong, who is played by Lee Bong-ryeon, Chang Young-guk, who is played by In Gyo-jin, and Cho Hui, who is played by Hong Ji-hee. And basically, these three have kind of been revolving around each other since they were teenagers.
So two of them are a divorced couple. One of them is she owns a raw fish shop. She's also Hyejin's landlady. She's an area chief. What?
nothing. I was just gonna say that raw fish shop, like food in this show, I'd be watching it and I'm like, I want a raw fish platter, please. Thank you. But please continue.
but one of the big mysteries, there are three mysteries in the town. One is why did she get divorced from her husband, who he works at like the town hall. I don't know, he sucks, he's boring, I don't like him.
He's the worst.
And then another mystery is who won the lottery, and another mystery is what the fuck happened to Dushik. But they're divorced, no one knows why, and they also have like a very adorable child who is like
He's
struggling with his
precocious.
parents to divorce. He's so cute. But
So cute.
Cho Hui comes back, and it turns out we learn through various flashbacks that she used to live in this town, and she comes back as an elementary school teacher, and she was the ex-husband's first love, or chatsarang. And first love is very big in K-dramas and also very annoying in K-dramas to me personally, because it's
Yeah.
like set up on this pedestal as like you always remember your first love and blah blah blah. So when she shows up, it throws this wrench into
Yay.
the not necessarily cordial, but at least static relationship between the raw fish shop owner and her ex-husband. And I thought, and I was partially right, that there was a lot of tension between the school teacher and the raw fish shop owner, and that they might be lesbians. I was half right because the elementary school teacher is a lesbian.
And I think the thing about the triangle that was most annoying, or at least was most heartbreaking, was one, like Corinne said, there were some heavy hints where
Mhm.
I was skeptical initially. But I think it was episode like 7 or 8 where like we actually got like a deep dive kind of on what the fish owner and the fish shop owner and the teacher's relationship was, and just kind of their chemistry.
And kind of the thing was that the three of them used to be really, really good friends when they were younger.
Really, really close.
And Cho Hui had to leave Gongjin because, quote unquote, her mother was ill.
Yes. But she lived with Hua Zhong for a period, for while she was there. She stayed at her house.
Her boarding house, I think.
Her boarding house, yeah.
But yeah, so there was just a lot of chemistry there and a lot of history, and it felt like, oh, this actually might be a direction that they went in. They didn't. That would be perfectly fine if the husband or the ex-husband was a remotely likable character. And I think for me, this was one of the more perplexing parts of this drama, where the entirety of the show, and I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he comes across as kind of like this comedic butt monkey of a character, in the sense that like bad things are constantly happening to him. He is not the nicest person. to give a example, the cafe owner whose wife died that we were previously
Oh, this
talking
is like the
about.
most egregious example.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say, just pick the
they
worst
were,
one.
but this was kind of like the turning moment for him, allegedly. But like they have this moment where he's asking the cafe owner, he's like, "Hey, it's been a while. Do you still really miss your wife? I know it's been like 5 years or so since she's died, or however many years. I don't remember how many it was." But he's like, "Do you still miss her?"
Like, why do
And the
you do
cafe
that? Why
owner,
do you still like her?
yeah, and then the cafe owner, and I'm just like, as if that's not bad enough, the cafe owner turns to him and is like, "Hey, we had this conversation like 3 years ago." And
Oh,
then we
no, no, no.
flash back.
So, yeah, because Judy is like 12. So he was like, how do you still love her all of these years later? And it's like 12 years later. So if we're going to
Ah,
flash,
that's right. That's right. That's
she's
right.
she's
No, but
she's
the
big.
but the initial flashback that they show is like it's 3 years ago because it's just before he gets the divorce
Divorce. Yeah.
with the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well, fish owner. But like, yeah, they're in a bar. The cafe owner and the husband are in a bar, and he's asking him the same question, and it just the lack of empathy, just I don't know. He was a character that I couldn't really get behind. There was very little in terms of what he was doing, like in terms of his interactions with other characters, in terms of just how he was presented, that really kind of made me feel any kind of empathy to him.
So I think this might be another place where pacing was not in Home Cha's favor because I could have, because of how they were acting with each other beforehand, really come to believe that they got back together again. But it was very, very fast from him realizing what he had done to break Hua Jung's heart to them getting back together again. So, for some context, during that conversation where he was asking uh Oyun how you still love your wife even though it's been 9 years since she died.
Oh
Um
God.
God, as a quick aside, I will get back to this story, but Andrew and Corinne did not warn me how many dead moms were in this show, and that was very insensitive. I was not prepared for the sheer number of dead mothers and how much I would be crying about it.
Yeah, there what, at least 3?
At least 3. At least.
Sushi
Uh,
Cajun,
and
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 Judy's
Judy's.
mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're three. They're three.
And then someone dies. We have an additional dead mother at that point.
Ah, four. That's
So,
right.
a lot of dead moms. Nobody told me. Very insensitive. But during this flashback conversation, what Jungkook says is like, I just married her because she was there and we were at the age in which people should be getting married. And like, I wasn't passionately in love with her. She was my friend. So like, we
She
got
was my friend
married.
and Chohui had left, and I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah,
She
what
was
else was I
there.
gonna do?
So I married her. And Hua overheard all of that, and that is why they got divorced. But he didn't realize this for 3 years and thought it was because he left socks on the floor. You know
Which
what?
is
I wasn't so mad about this until we were talking about it, and I want to fight this man now.
yeah. He is a trash human being. I mean, and I think the thing. So honestly, I think the thing that for me is most. I don't want to be hyperbolic in saying unforgivable, but the thing that makes it the worst is that his moment of realization comes from like realizing, oh, my wife heard the horrible thing that I said, and now I realize it's horrible because I know that she heard it. There's no kind of moment of there's no self-examination. There's no like
Mm.
I don't see how he gets from oh shit she found out to oh my god I still love her and I want to get back to her. And like I know that to be fair, throughout the series, there are moments where his wife is constantly kind of looking out for him and doing things for him that, he's not aware of. But again, it's all about his wife being awesome and him being just a jerk. And there's no kind of self examination or growth that happens.
Well, he does kind of comment that he's been taking her for granted and taking their friendship for granted, which sometimes can be a hard realization that you've been taking somebody for granted and being forced to reckon with the fact that you did that. However, that doesn't mean that they should then get back together because of that one realization, or that, it doesn't make it go away that he was doing that because he realized he was doing it.
I don't know. I guess for me, it feels like he already knew that he was doing all this stuff, though, because he wouldn't have had the reaction that he did, that, she overheard what he said, if he didn't know how horrible it was on
Well, he
some
didn't
level.
he didn't remember because he was so plastered that night. He didn't even remember how he got home. So in talking with Oyun and remembering the conversation, first he remembers what he said and then the fact that she heard it. So he's kind of like, "Oh fuck, I can't believe I said that. Oh, double fuck. She heard me when I said that terrible thing." So again, I still want to fight that man, but I just think it's important to, that it wasn't like he was carrying around this knowledge that he said this stuff the entire time.
I mean, I guess for me, that I don't know. I ultimately was happy that Shohei was a lesbian, and like I don't really care about anything else that happened. But like I think it's also like one of the only reasons that he like even started being interested in his ex-wife again was because Shohei turned him down. Like he confessed, and she was basically like, I not only do I not have feelings for you now, I have never had feelings for you, which now that I say that seems very brutal, but it's because she's a lesbian. And I don't know, that he's like, oh well, like my first love wasn't an option then, so readers, I married her, and then now my first love isn't an option again, so like I guess I'll look at my ex-wife again. Like that's
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
That
repeating
no.
the same it's repeating the same behavior, and it's
Yeah.
just like, you can tell me that a character, like, I don't know, like I said, I just didn't buy the leap of, oh my god, I'm an awful person, I need to make this right.
Mhm.
It just I don't know, there were some steps I feel like that were missing to get me to kind of buy that turn from him.
I will say though, when their son started crying because he was so happy they were getting back together again, that
Oh
broke
my
me.
god. What like
He was
he
precious.
started crying, and then his best friend Bora started crying, and then I started crying. There was just like a lot of crying, and watching like little kids cry.
Oh god. Yeah,
It
because
was a
he was
lot, man.
because he was like, "It was so hard when you got divorced, but I wanted to be strong, but I'm so happy that you're back together again that I can't stop crying, and I
And
didn't
like we
wanna
can
just."
eat meals together now, and
Oh,
it doesn't have to be a special occasion.
that's what he was like, "I don't want it to just be my birthday or this celebration or that celebration. I want us to eat together all the time." I was like, "Baby, you guys can have all the meals you want. Eat."
And
So
then And
for
then
him, I'm
Bora
glad.
was like, yeah, and like, and I have to eat with him all the time too because he was so lonely, and I never want him to be lonely again. It was so cute.
Bora is great.
Yeah,
Bora is great.
I love her, little Bora with her blonde hair and her giant glasses. Adore.
Yeah, I think that that was something, and I mean, this is like the most backhanded compliment, but like the show was very good at not necessarily earning certain payoffs, but then getting me emotionally invested in it anyway.
Damn.
Because like I did not. Well, no, because like I did not care about the parents getting back together. Just, I mean, clearly based on the rant that I just went on,
I was gonna
but
say,
I
yeah.
was 100% tearing up when Iju was talking about how he felt and how happy he was.
Yeah.
hmm
Putting a pause though on our ranting because I feel like we could continue to be mad about this particular triangle for a long time. Why don't we go back to our main couple for a little bit? Andrew, you had mentioned earlier, you had opened the door about the length of the show and kind of whether the love story, whether the narrative could like hold out over those 16 episodes. So, one of the questions that we had, and one of the things that we're thinking about that I think ties into that is how sweet is too sweet? Did how the relationship played out over the course of this 16 episodes work for you guys? Were you, you know, uh, did every episode have you enraptured as they were going through their romance? Like, where were your heads with that?
So I think for me, I did get a little bit like I was very into the like will they won't they phase of Hyejin and Chief Hong's relationship. I thought that was very funny, especially when they like pulled in fake dating for like no discernible reason.
Oh yeah, that
Like-
was good. That was good.
Oh, so random.
It was so random, and yet that is one of my favorite tropes, so I was all in for that. But then once they got together, there was an episode where they kept their relationship a secret, but then there were like there were too many episodes where they were just happy together, which sounds very like horrible to say, but they were just happy together, and there wasn't enough. It wasn't even so much that there wasn't enough conflict. It was for me that they had teased Dushik's dark, tragic backstory so much that I was like, okay, the other issue was gonna drop. I know it's gonna, and I need you to drop it because I need us to keep moving.
So hashtag Corinne hates happiness. You all can run with that one.
But I'm exactly like, I agree 100% because I think the thing that annoyed me about that phase of the show wasn't so much the sweetness, but it was kind of just like looking at it and being like, you got other shit to do. Like there's so many storyline threads, particularly around Dusik, that are just not being touched. And we have these kind of two, how many episodes was it?
It was like episode 11, 12, 13, and then 14 was the one where she was like, you have a secret you're not telling me, so we need a break.
I was going to say like 3 episodes, but I thought that maybe I was being hyperbolic. But no, like 3 episodes where we're kind of getting them in the honeymoon phase. And I get one thing that I will say that was nice is more often than not when you're dealing with, if we're looking at rom-coms, the characters get together, they split apart, and then we don't really get to enjoy them together because by the time they get back together, story's over and it's time for us to move on. So it was nice to kind of get to see them as a couple and,
I agree.
just being able to enjoy that. However, again, it's like there was other shit that the story needed to kind of be doing at that point. At least I felt like, in terms of the plot threads that you kind of promised that you were going to get to. And it felt like all of that was, or the majority of it was really kind of put on the back burner in lieu of just kind of keeping us in this honeymoon pocket for 3 episodes.
Yeah, I was just looking at the actual episode list. And they confess to each other at the end of episode 10. Then episode 11 is when they try to keep it a secret.
I do think that was deeply hilarious. Her like Hyejin being like, we should keep it a secret, and Dushik is like, it absolutely will not work. We can try. It absolutely will not happen. They will know right away. And she's like, we should do it though. And he's like, okay, well, like, okay, we'll do it because you want to, but also like they will know immediately. And they did.
Yep. They did.
And then she spends the bulk of the episode brutalizing him, trying to keep it.
Beating the shit out of him. I was like, oh my God.
A lot.
Yeah. Gave him a bloody nose. And then episode 12 was the bucket list episode. And then episode 13 is when they go golfing. And then it was at the end of that episode when they decide to take a break. So yeah, it's like 1, 2, and then most of 3 episodes that were just kind of like, we're doing cute coupley stuff. And, I think I often talk about this. I think I've talked about it on the pod in that I like seeing relationships, not necessarily the start of the relationship, but seeing how relationships actually work once they've gotten off the ground, because I think that there's a lot of good content that's there. But I think for me, a lot of it was very much that early relationship honeymoon phase stuff that I just don't really, not that I don't care about, I'm happy for them, but more like that's not story for me.
Yeah, like you just don't need to sit with it for that long.
Yeah. And I do like a good slice of life story, but Hometown for me it's not a slice of life. We're not just watching it to watch people in their day-to-day life activities, even though that makes up part of the backdrop. Like there are things that are propelling the narrative forward. So I think you both are kind of right that, we didn't need to sit with that for so long.
I will say, in those episodes' defense, our podcast Unis over at Afternoon of Delight tweeted about these episodes because the reaction to a lot of them was like, okay, like, keep it moving. This is very sweet. But they tweeted out, since they're romance authors, that this was the episodes where they're having the quote fun and games time that would enable the couple to get through their quote black moment to come. And I do think that now that the drama is over, that is true that happened. But I guess, I don't know. For me, the fun and games were just fun and games and weren't necessarily building emotional intimacy. And maybe that's the problem that I had with them.
And
I get that.
And I also think kind of like, so giving me an episode of like, you know, the bubblegum, they're together, they're in their honeymoon phase, that is perfectly fine, you know. And I do agree. I think that kind of it gives us kind of our wish of what are they like as a couple, seeing them be like, you know, in those goofy early stages of the relationship and kind of prepping us for, you know, the storm that's to come. I think, you know, having that storm kind of come 2.5 episodes, you know, into that is where things start to get a bit unbalanced, because when the storm hits, it hits. It's not like, oh, we're gonna drip it in and we're gonna kind of ratchet up tension. It's like, no, we have an episode where they're kind of at odds, and then the storm hits and it just kind of barrels through like all of episode 15.
I'm so,
you know,
thinking about comparing it with the sort of like beats to a drama like Chloe Crash Landing on You, I think is maybe interesting, because we do have like 2.5, 3 episodes in Chloe of like quote unquote fun and games, of like the squad in South Korea and figuring that out, and of like Yoon Se-ri and Captain Ri Jung-hook's relationship. But I think maybe because that never felt slow to me in the same way that this did. And I'm wondering, I think the difference is because with that one, we know what the tensions are, and we already have a better idea of what the shoe that's going to drop looks like. So
yeah, and I think the stakes are higher too, because they've
Oh, yeah.
snuck into South
the
Korea.
stakes are
so
super
like,
wild in that one. I don't need
So-
all of my stakes to be as high as they are in Chloe, to be clear.
No. I'm not saying that. It's just more that it adds a different kind of context to the fun and games, because now it's not just like we're happy having a good time. It's like, no, these are people who are putting themselves in mortal danger. But this is also the first time that they are experiencing what it means to be in Seoul. And it totally changes their perspective on the world, even, you know, so.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing with Chloe, is that like with great writing, you tend to find, or like, you know, great storytelling, like you're typically seeing more than one thing be accomplished at the same time. So with Chloe, the fun and games, you had that kind of cultural exchange going on. You also kind of had like much needed breathers, because like you said, Ayani, the stakes were really high and things would get really tense. So to kind of allow us to come down from that, we needed those kind of episodes or those long stretches of calm. But Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha is a different vibe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that high tension. So when it takes 2 episodes to kind of just coast in a way, we really kind of feel that lagging, because we're not coming down from anything major, you know?
Yeah. So since we're kind of moving towards the ending of the show, and it almost feels like moving towards the end of our episode as well, I thought it might be nice to think about marriage as your happily ever after. And part of that is because we have my spouse on the show. So I think thinking about like marriage as the end goal or as the end game. And this is, of course, broadly speaking, right? This is not something that just happened in Home Child, but this happens in a lot of media where it's like, once you get married, that's it. It's the end. You did it. Congratulations. You take pretty pictures and you ride off into the sunset or splash around on the beach or whatever. So, what do we think about how marriage kind of works in this show? Because I think we also get a lot of different representations of marriage here. We have Haejin's father who remarried her stepmother. We have our divorced couple who ends up getting back together again. We have Bora's parents who stay married the whole time, but they have their little thing too. And then we have Dushik and Haejin. Oh, and then we didn't really talk a lot about her buddy, about Mison and her little boo. I call him the little policeman, but he has a name, Unchol. We didn't really talk about them, but there's a lot of different like marriageness floating around in this story.
I will say that one of Minji's complaints when we talked about it, Minji, friend of the show, she was annoyed that everybody coupled up at the end. She's like, that's unnecessary. That's too much. Too many couples.
Too
Got
much,
to pair all
too
them
much
spares.
love. But yeah, so what do we think about kind of marriage as our end goal here, even for divorced people to get back together again?
For this story, it didn't bother me so much. And I guess because tonally, a lot of kind of it wasn't doing, how do I put this? The purpose of the story, or at least kind of with the romantic, rom-com tone that has been clearly established, that typically is the end goal there, and for me, it was kind of just meeting that genre expectation in a way. The show wasn't doing, I mean, it did some examinations of kind of what makes these relationships, like these individual relationships that, like, we've seen, like Hyejin's father, Mission and Eunchul's relationship. Like, we get a glimpse of kind of what makes them tick, but it didn't feel like the show was doing a lot of deep diving in that area. So I don't know. The only, I mean, my opinion, the only marriage that I don't think should have happened again were, the divorced couple, but it made June happy, so it's fine.
Yeah, it made the baby happy, so that's fine.
I'll say I wasn't that bothered by it, I think, because I think the last episode, while it was very sweet, felt like a return to form after the trauma of episode 15. And the vibe of, like, Gongjin, to me, it was more a feeling of, like, Gongjin as a special place rather than all these couples as special, which I personally found more convincing. And also, just, like, as a side note, I really love that Hyejin decided to propose to Dushik first. And then he was like very taken aback. But I love that sequence. I thought it was so funny and adorable.
I also appreciate that she proposed with shoes. Because that's something that, we don't have time to unpack today, but shoes definitely work their way throughout the entirety of this show. And the fact that she was like, here's some bomb ass sneakers, be my boo forever. Like, I like that. Oh, Corinne, you're making a face.
Did you not like I liked it. I really liked the, like, the very sort of visceral image of, like, I want your shoes, like, at the front door next to mine. That is very, at least from the outside, felt very Korean, because, like, shoes, and they were important to their relationship, and they're also important, like, culturally, like, you take them off at the front door, and it just, that image of, like, their shoes always being next to each other was a really good one.
So a while back, Kern and I went to a conference where there was a presentation about love triangles, in which the conversation was that always these love triangles are setting people up against each other, and ultimately the goal is to, like, lob off one of the points of the triangle and just have, your two connecting as your happily ever after. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the relationship between Director G, who we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but the second male lead, and Chief Hong, and how they kind of developed this bond that I imagine continues long after the show is done. So I think it might be interesting to think about, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this or any time at all because it's just my rambling, but the way that, like, we're playing with the expectation of the love triangle in this show, because we have our one that had subverted your expectations of who the second male lead or second female lead was actually interested in. I guess lead's not the right term, but the second lady on the triangle
other
point.
Woman.
Yeah, the quote unquote other woman who she was actually interested in, but then also here playing with the expectation of what the relationship is between the two men in the triangle. And I would have supported it if they all just loved each other and, like, had a polyamorous relationship, but that's clearly not going to happen.
It's because Ayane just wanted this to be a boys' love romance instead.
Yeah, she did.
Instead, I don't want to write Hyejin out of the equation. I'm just saying.
Literally texted us a picture of the two of them, and we're like,
I would like them to start kissing.
Yes.
I just said I shipped it, is all. I can ship all of it. It can be a very large ship. They can all ride in the ship together. But also, how did this become the, like, make fun of Ayane podcast? Because you guys have been ganging up on me all episode, and I don't appreciate it.
It's just normally the opposite. Normally, y'all are ganging up on me, so I don't know how this happened.
It's been in the water today. Everyone's like, we're gonna just tease Ayane.
I am a force of chaos. I cannot be predicted.
Almost spit out my water. That's good. That's funny. Moving aside from my little question about triangles, Corinne, you have a note here about Hijin turning down her really good job offer, though. Did we want to talk about that at all to kind of wrap up?
I mean, I guess maybe building on if not going all the way and having a lesbian couple or a gay couple, the show does, I think, play with our expectations of what a happy ending for a love triangle looks like. And I think
Mhm.
there's a way in that it also played with the expectations of what a happy ending in a K-drama rom-com looks like, because like
Hmm.
Hyejin does get an offer for a good job back in Seoul, and she's set up this whole time to to prioritize basically making a bunch of cash so she can go back to Seoul and start to practice there instead. And I think
Mhm.
part of that is like, you know, Chief Hong like sanding down some of her rough edges and whatever. But I do think there is another way that the show is subverting expectations, and that Hyejin turns down the job offer, but also turns down the job offer easily to stay in Gongjin, not
Mhm.
just for Dushik and their relationship, but also because it's a place that she's happy and where she's found
Mhm. Mhm.
belonging, and in a lot of ways that goes against the expectation of like all roads lead to Seoul. Like it's okay for some roads to lead to other places, and I think also
Mm.
works to underscore what to me like this was as much a love story between Hyejin and Dushik as it was a love letter, a love story about a place, as
Mhm.
much
Mhm.
it was
Mhm.
as it
Mhm.
was about people. And I think the
Yeah, and I think
ending built on that. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
no, you're fine. And I think what's key also is that not only is it that Hyejin has grown to love Gongjing, but it's also that she feels a sense of responsibility. Like one of the
Yeah.
things that she
Mhm.
says is like, "Ah, I can't leave. You know, I'm the only dentist here." You know, and I think that that also shows how far she's come. Because if I recall correctly, like in the first couple episodes, she was not about participating in like the cleanup
Mm-mm.
committees and
Mm-mm.
taking care of the town, and now she's staying here not just because this is where her boo is, but it's become her home, and she feels a sense of responsibility to this community.
And I think that's also maybe an instance where her and Dushik's values and what they value has become more aligned, that I think is made very
Mm.
very literal on screen, that like
Mhm.
Dushik
Mhm.
stays in Gongjin because he wants to help people and also needs to be needed, but he does also enjoy helping people. And like at the
Yeah.
end where they're taking their wedding pictures, and then they both get phone calls that like Dushik needs to help someone with something and Hyejin needs to help someone who like needs mouth things. I don't know. They both like I don't know. I'm not a dentist, clearly.
Needs mouth things. My
Mouth
God.
things, yeah.
But they get a call at the same time and like run back to Gongjin. So that's, I don't know. It's another way that I think the setting is part of what makes this drama tick in a very, I think, real way that it wouldn't if it was just Hyejin and Dushik and their relationship driving it.
I think that sounds like a great place to kind of wrap up our discussion of Home Cha. If you enjoyed our conversation of Hometown Cha Cha Cha, you can find it on Netflix. All of the episodes are out now,
By that, she
so
means
it's
you can find Hometown Cha 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 on Netflix, not that you can find our conversation on Netflix.
I was gonna say I didn't know that y'all had inked that deal.
wow. All
I
right.
wasn't made aware of this.
Guess I'm brain tired. I wish you could find us on Netflix.
I
Maybe we'll
don't,
get
then we'd got to
Netflix one
record
day.
video.
Oh, oh, yeah, that's fair. Um, anyhow, you should watch Home Cha. I mean, I think we overall enjoyed it, even though we have our qualms about it. I think in a lot of ways it is a softer show. So if you're coming off of something that is very dramatic or very intense, it could be a good palate cleanser or balance well off of that. Did anyone have any final Home Cha thoughts?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I really recommend it. It's a good sort of calm watch to have if you don't want to get too stressed out.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall series is. I mean, I know I picked at it a lot, but the actors are great, the characters are great, and I think that the setting is actually weirdly enough been one of my favorite that I've watched. You know, in these Korean dramas so far.
Excellent. Well, Corinne, what do we have coming up in subsequent episodes of Sex Love Literature?
So I don't know exactly what we're doing, but we are going to have one of our unis on Afternoon of Delight come to talk to us about second male leads. That'll be very fun for me. We are also eventually going to do an episode on Your Name, and we're also
There we go.
potentially going to do an episode on the second season of The Great, which drops in November. I am very excited about that.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, I'm super excited about that. That will probably be our November episode if I'm thinking about our listing right now. But yeah, if there's something you're interested in hearing us talk about, feel free to drop us a line on any of our social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SexLoveLit, all one word. Also, I think you can actually listen to our podcast on Facebook now. I think there's some new thing where like I've submitted the RSS feed. So if you are on Facebook like that, you might be able to just find our podcast there rather than going to any of the other podcast platforms. Andrew, where can people find you if they are interested in hearing more of your opinions about Reply 1988 or any other K drama that you've been watching?
I mean, you could probably find me whistling in the background of your podcast.
That's very fair. If you want to talk to Andrew, just go on Sex Love Literature accounts. You can find him there.
Or you can check out my accounts where sometimes he likes to come to pick a fight.
Oh yeah, that's right. Corinne and I had a Twitter beef.
I had no beef. Andrew is just rude.
And with that, I think that's been our episode of Sex Love Literature. Thank you so much for joining us for our antics. Andrew, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. It was fun watching you in a different corner of our house on our video. The house still exists even when I'm locked in the office, I suppose. But yeah, this has been Sex Love Literature, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.